Alright, the Chinese two-stroke crank mystery. Now, I measured all my cranks to be between 32 and 34 millimeters of stroke, and I'm going to show you how I got these measurements, the different ways I measured them, and I'm going to confirm using the digital calipers. So, just to show you what I have here first is the 40 millimeter piston ported engine crank. Just ripped open the Frankenstein engine to show you guys and confirm these numbers. This one has a 10 millimeter wrist pin and 34 millimeter stroke. Here's 40 millimeter CAG crank, 10 millimeter wrist pin, 32 millimeter stroke. And last we have 44 millimeter piston CAG crank with a 12 millimeter wrist pin and a 32.5 millimeter stroke. So I'm going to show you how I was measuring these, and I'm going to show you how these numbers all line up. Just got a fresh battery in the digital calipers. Let's do some measuring. Alright, the journals are 15 millimeters on all these engines. So what I'm going to do is measure from the outside of the journal to the center of the crank pin. Now this number happens to be 24.5 millimeters. So subtract the radius of the 15 millimeter journal and you wind up with 17 millimeters. Multiply that by 2 and you get your stroke, which is 34 millimeters. Up next, the 40 millimeter piston CAG crank, 32 millimeter stroke. This measurement is 23.5 millimeters. Now the less you line it up, the smaller the measurement gets. So I'm going with the biggest possible measurement I can see on this, and it's 23.5 millimeters. So subtract 7.5 and you wind up with 16, which equates to a 32 millimeter stroke crank. If this crank measured 30 millimeters of stroke, this measurement right here would be 22.5 millimeters, and that does not look right to me. So let me show you the 44 millimeter piston CAG crank with the 32.5 millimeter stroke. This number measures 23.75 millimeters. Subtract 7.5 from the journal and you get 16.25 millimeters. Multiply that by 2 and it's 32.5 millimeter stroke. So I'm going to show you the next way I got this. My phone's running low on space, so I'm going to have to go on to part 2.